Have you ever noticed how becoming attached to something seems natural, but in reality, it is imprisoning you? Jung said that the greatest illusion of the mind is believing that happiness and security depend on people, objects, or external ideas. And what if I told you that by letting all of this go, you would become stronger, freer, and more capable of truly living? It is almost impossible to imagine, but this is the key that few dare to accept. Get ready, because after this video, the way you see everything in your life will never be the same. If topics like psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. There is a pain that almost no one talks about. It is not the one that explodes in shouts of anger or tears over betrayal, but a subtle, almost invisible pain that settles in when you hold on to something that no longer holds you back. It could be an old memory, a broken promise, or the idealized image of who you swore you would become. This pain does not appear in diagnoses, but suffocates silently, as if it were stealing the air without you noticing. It is like being trapped in a shadow and believing that there is still light there. Anyone who has held on to a dead relationship, a stagnant dream, or an old version of themselves knows what it is like. It feels as if letting go is betraying yourself, admitting defeat, or worse, killing a part of who you are. And that is exactly what makes attachment so cruel, because it disguises itself as loyalty but feeds on fear. The person thinks they are protecting something precious, when in reality, they are only imprisoning themselves. It is like hugging ashes while believing they are still fire. This silent pain carries a strange weight. You wake up every day carrying something that no longer fits in your life, but you insist on keeping it, as if it were an invisible armor. It is the job that exhausts you, but you do not let go of. It is the friendship that only exists because you insist on keeping it alive alone. It is that one-sided love that hurts, but you confuse it with hope. All of this seems like security, but it is only fear disguised as loyalty. The most curious thing is that no one teaches us how to let go. From early on, we learn to fight, conquer, hold on tight, but not to release. We do not learn that love, dreams, and even ourselves change. And when we change, letting go is not abandoning. It is simply following the flow of life. But how can we admit this if the mind screams that detachment is loss, when in fact, it can be precisely the beginning of gaining something greater? Imagine someone holding a rope so tightly that their hands start to bleed. Instinct says to continue because letting go seems dangerous. But the real pain does not come from the emptiness that appears when letting go, but from the constant cutting caused by holding on too much. It is the same with memories, relationships, and even old identities. Attachment is not strength. It is resistance against life. And this resistance only generates exhaustion. Deep down, what prevents us from letting go is not love, but fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of not knowing who we are without that dream. Fear of losing the identity we have built around that person or that ideal. Attachment is like a comfortable mask, but it prevents air from entering. And every day that you keep it, you feel your soul suffocating a little more. At this point, attachment begins to shape life as an invisible prison. You believe you are preserving something sacred, but what you are really preserving is fear. Fear of facing silence. Fear of confronting the void. Fear of seeing yourself in the mirror without that crutch that sustained your identity. And ironically, the more you hold on, the more you lose yourself. The silent pain of attachment does not scream, but it corrodes. It does not explode like thunder, but acts like infiltration, gradually destroying the foundations. And perhaps the cruelest part is realizing that by trying to save what we love, we may be the very ones who suffocate it. But why do we do this? Why? Even seeing the signs, do we insist on not letting go? Sometimes we think attachment is proof of love, but if we look closely, it is born of fear. You do not cling to someone because you love purely, but because you fear the silence that would come without that person. You do not hold on to a dream because it still moves you, but because you fear not knowing who you are without it. This is the trick of attachment. It wears the clothes of loyalty, but carries the essence of terror. The fear of being alone is one of the most powerful. That is why so many people prefer toxic relationships to none at all. It is like insisting on drinking poisoned water, just not to die of thirst. Deep down, it is not love, it is despair. Love is presence, it is flow, it is freedom. Attachment is chain, it is prison, it is suffocation. And the more you confuse the two, the more your soul gets lost in this trap. With dreams, it is the same. You believe you are still fighting for that ideal, but you no longer feel the sparkle in your eyes. What keeps you trapped is no longer passion. It is fear of seeing yourself adrift, of admitting that that path is lost. And instead of creating new horizons, you insist on dragging the ruins of a project that no longer breathes. It is like carrying a lifeless body on your back and calling it hope. And perhaps the most painful is when attachment turns against yourself. You cling to old versions of who you were, even knowing they no longer serve. You hold on to the identity of the young dreamer, the successful professional, the invincible romantic, as if letting go would mean disappearing. And in this process, you prevent new versions of yourself from flourishing. Fear of the void makes you suffocate your own future. This dynamic is so powerful that it shapes our choices without us noticing. How many have spent years in a job they hated just because the idea of changing seemed too frightening? How many hold on to friendships that no longer bring anything just because letting go would mean admitting the paths have changed? It is always the same pattern, calling fear love. And this fear feeds on what you most avoid confronting. Attachment then becomes a theater. On the outside, you show dedication, loyalty, and even courage. Inside, it is only the scared child who does not know how to exist alone. And that is where the great illusion lies, believing that resisting is strength, when in reality it is fragility. Because strength is not holding on desperately. Strength is trusting that by letting go, something new can emerge. But why does fear disguise itself so well as love? Because it uses exactly the emotions we value most: affection, loyalty, commitment. It knows that if it came naked, with its true face of insecurity, no one would embrace it. So it dresses in care, in devotion, and makes us believe it is virtue. And when we realize it, we are already chained. Deep down, attachment was never about the other, but about ourselves. It is not about the person, the dream, or the identity. It is about the terror of facing the void without them. It is this silent fear that makes us hold on to what is already dead. But is the void really an enemy? Or can it be the space where something new begins to grow? Many believe they can control everything around them, as if life were a chess game where each piece obeys their orders. Jung reminds us that this sense of power is only a delicate illusion, fragile like thin glass. And what happens when something escapes your control? Despair knocks at the door, silent and relentless. It is curious how we cling to this control, believing it protects us from pain. But in reality, it is precisely it that makes us vulnerable. Think of those movies in which the character plans every detail of their life, every step, every movement, and yet everything collapses unexpectedly. It is like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you try, the more it escapes. In real life, this same phenomenon happens all the time in relationships, in careers, even in how we perceive our own bodies. Jung challenges us to accept that life does not obey our orders, and that embracing uncertainty is the first step to real freedom. When we try to control too much, we forget to live in the present. Attachment to control creates constant anxiety, a silent buzz that corrodes the mind. Jung would say that it is in this space between expectation and reality that the true opportunity for growth arises. It is as if the universe conspires to teach us that flexibility is more powerful than rigidity. Each deviation, each unforeseen event, is a disguised teacher reminding us that nothing can be completely trapped. Imagine holding a rope that pulls harder and harder. The more you resist, the more you feel pain. This is the effect of attachment to control over life. Jung invites us to let go of the rope, even for a moment, and observe how everything continues to move, often for the better. The mind that understands this begins to perceive the beauty in impermanence, the value of the unexpected, and the lightness of simply letting things flow. Controlling the external world is an illusion. Controlling the mind, on the other hand, is an art. Jung shows us that internal discipline, awareness of thoughts and emotions, makes us unbeatable even in the midst of chaos. It is like training for a game in which the rules constantly change. Whoever masters themselves is never defeated. And the most paradoxical part? The less we try to control, the more real power we acquire, even if silently and almost imperceptibly. This understanding also transforms relationships and expectations. When we stop trying to command people or situations, we begin to see each individual and each moment as a gift, rather than an obligation or a threat. Jung encourages to realize that every experience, no matter how chaotic it seems, has a hidden purpose. Detachment does not mean indifference, but rather the wisdom of not depending on the external to maintain our peace. To illustrate, think about how some suspense series make us root for the unlikely, to remind us that everything is unpredictable. Life is exactly like that. A narrative we do not completely control, but one we can enjoy fully if we stop fighting against it. Each plot twist is an opportunity to learn, a chance to test our courage, to grow without chains. Jung teaches us that true freedom emerges when we realize control is just a comfortable myth. And this is the point where many stumble. Understanding control is one thing, living it is completely different. Letting go of attachment, feeling the flow of life, accepting that each loss or change is part of something greater, is a daily, silent, almost invisible exercise. But, as Jung would indicate, it is precisely this exercise that transforms us from the inside out, preparing the ground for the next steps in self-knowledge to be even deeper and more impactful. Attachment to people is perhaps the subtlest of all attachments. Jung shows us that many times we believe we depend on someone to be happy, as if our inner peace were locked in another's hands. And when that person leaves or changes, we feel a deep emptiness, almost as if the ground disappears beneath our feet. But the truth is that no one holds our happiness. It has always existed within us, waiting to be recognized. It is curious how, from an early age, we learn to measure love and security by the actions of others. Jung would say this creates an endless cycle of expectation and disappointment. How many times have you felt frustrated because someone did not meet your desire for closeness or attention? This is the trap of attachment, believing that others are responsible for your emotional well-being. Freedom arises when we recognize that this is an illusion. Attachment to people is not only emotional, but also symbolic. Each friend, partner, or mentor represents something we want inside ourselves: security, approval, understanding. Jung teaches that by projecting these qualities onto others, we become vulnerable to loss and frustration. The solution is not to stop loving, but to understand that no one can be the ultimate source of completeness. Each relationship is a mirror, not a prison. Imagine a video game where you depend on a partner to progress, and suddenly they disappear. The sense of helplessness is immediate, but it is at that moment that you discover strengths you never imagined possessing. Jung believed that detachment from people forces us to develop internal resources, trust in our own presence, and build solid emotional autonomy that does not falter with the absence or change of others. Attachment often manifests in routine, sending messages, waiting for replies, checking profiles. Jung would indicate that these small habits, seemingly harmless, are subtle forms of emotional slavery. Letting go of attachment is allowing each person to be free, while also recognizing that your own happiness does not depend on their constant presence. It is like realizing that oxygen is inside you, not in another lung. It is in this detachment that true connection flourishes. When we expect nothing in return, when we free ourselves from the need to control others, a more genuine, deeper love emerges. Jung reminds us that loving without attachment does not mean becoming cold or distant. It is simply seeing reality without illusions, appreciating the presence of the other without it being essential for our peace. Think of films or series where characters free themselves from toxic or codependent relationships. Their transformation does not happen because the other changes, but because they recognize their own worth. Jung guides us to see life this way. Each person who enters or leaves is an invitation to look within, discover inner strengths, and realize that emotional dependence is not love, but imprisonment. And this is the point where many hesitate. Detaching from loved ones without losing oneself is a silent art. Jung would say that this ability is built step by step, through reflections, practices, and small daily choices. The more we exercise this emotional freedom, the closer we come to a full existence where each bond is enriching, but does not define our happiness or our sense of life. Many people do not realize it, but attachment to objects and possessions can be as suffocating as attachment to people. Jung shows us that we accumulate things seeking security, status, or identity, as if each object were an extension of who we are. And when something is lost or broken, we feel disproportionate pain, a void that seems irrational. It is striking how seemingly inanimate objects can dominate our minds and emotions. Think about the last time something you valued was lost or damaged. Jung would suggest that this frustration does not come from the loss itself, but from the attachment we created. Each watch, car, or electronic device is, in a way, an emotional anchor. And the paradox is cruel. The more we depend on these objects to feel complete, the more vulnerable we become. It is interesting how advertising and society fuel this need for possession. We are encouraged to believe that happiness and success depend on what we accumulate, not on who we are. Jung would remind us that each material desire is also a projection of internal deficiencies. Freedom emerges when we learn to see possessions as tools, not prisons. Imagine a survival scenario, like in adventure films, where all material goods disappear. Those who depended excessively on possessions fall into despair, while others discover skills and creativity they never imagined they had. Jung teaches us that detachment from objects is actually a training to discover internal resources and independence that nothing external can offer. Attachment to objects also creates constant fear. Fear of losing, of being stolen from, of not having enough. Jung would point out that this fear is an illusion that drains our vital energy. The more we cling, the less free we feel. Freeing ourselves from this cycle does not mean rejecting comfort or aesthetics, but recognizing that the essence of our security and happiness is not outside, but within ourselves. This detachment does not need to be radical. It can begin with small daily actions, such as organizing, donating, or simply reflecting on the real value of things. Jung would suggest observing each object and asking, "Am I the owner, or am I the slave of this?" This simple reflection changes perspective and brings us closer to a lighter life, where possessions exist, but do not define or imprison us. Movies, series, and even books show characters who lose everything and, paradoxically, find themselves in the process. Jung would indicate that the loss of material goods is an opportunity for inner growth, to experience real freedom, and to realize that we are much greater than what we can accumulate. Each detachment teaches us to deal with impermanence and value what truly matters. And this is the point where the lesson becomes profound. Letting go of attachment to external things is opening space for the internal, for creativity, autonomy, and awareness. Jung invites us to see that true power does not come from what we have, but from who we are when nothing else remains. It is a silent, daily invitation to experience freedom in its purest and most enduring form. One of the most subtle and powerful attachments Jung identifies is in our minds, our ideas and beliefs. They give us security, help us understand the world, and protect us from uncertainty. But the danger is that we become prisoners of these same ideas, unable to see new perspectives. It is like wearing glasses that filter reality. Everything outside this lens seems wrong or threatening. Often, we defend our beliefs tooth and nail, even in the face of contrary evidence. Jung warns that this attachment creates conflict, both internally and externally. At work, in debates, in relationships, how many arguments arise just because someone refuses to let go of a fixed idea? Realizing this is the first step to experiencing mental freedom. Imagine a series or movie where the protagonist must radically change their worldview to survive. The initial resistance, fear, and frustration are almost palpable. Jung teaches us that our ideas are flexible, and detachment from them allows us to evolve, learn, and even create solutions that previously seemed impossible. Letting go of beliefs is an act of intellectual and emotional courage. Attachment to ideas also generates silent suffering. When someone questions a belief of ours, we feel personally attacked, ashamed, or angry. Jung would call this projection. We see our internal rigidity reflected externally. Freedom arises when we can observe our beliefs with curiosity, without blindly identifying with them, turning conflict into learning. This detachment does not mean having no convictions. It means not being a slave to them. Jung guides us to distinguish between useful ideas and ideas that limit us. It is like having a map. It guides, but does not determine every step. By practicing this flexibility, we discover an adaptability and resilience that was previously hidden, opening space for a lighter and more conscious life. A practical example. You firmly believe that something must happen in a certain way, and reality shows the opposite. Reacting with anger or frustration is attachment in action. Jung would suggest observing the situation, learning what can be learned, and allowing the experience to transform us. Thus, each confrontation with our rigid beliefs becomes a real opportunity for growth. Science fiction or fantasy films often explore this theme. Worlds that challenge characters' perceptions, forcing them to abandon old certainties. Jung would remind us that our mind is equally expansive, and intellectual freedom only emerges when we let go of limiting ideas. Letting go is not losing something. It is gaining clarity, perspective, and inner power. And this is the point where transformation begins to deepen. By detaching from fixed ideas, we create space to explore, question, and reinvent ourselves. Jung invites us to experience this movement consciously, realizing that the mind freed from the chains of beliefs can understand the world and itself in ways that previously seemed unreachable. The past has an invisible force over all of us. Jung reminds us that when we cling to memories, regrets, or traumas, we create chains that prevent us from living fully in the present. It is like carrying a backpack full of stones. Each heavy memory limits us, even if some seem important to our story. The key is to learn from the past without being its slave. Often we find ourselves reliving old situations, trying to find answers that may never come. Jung would suggest that this repetition is a form of resistance to change, an attachment that keeps us trapped in what has already passed. The more we struggle to fix the past, the less energy we have to build the present. Freeing ourselves from it is paradoxically the most direct path to emotional maturity. Imagine a series where the protagonist is trapped by an old guilt and can only move forward when they finally accept it and transform it into learning. This is exactly what Jung proposes. Not ignoring the past, but integrating it. Each experience, no matter how painful, carries hidden lessons that, when recognized, strengthen our autonomy and decision-making ability. Attachment to the past also creates constant comparisons. Things were better before. This would not happen if. Jung would remind us that these comparisons trap us in a reality that no longer exists. Freedom emerges when we stop seeking security in something that is gone and begin to build meaning in the here and now. It is like looking ahead and realizing that new paths are waiting for us. This attachment can manifest in objects, photos, letters, or even words that echo in the mind. Each memory becomes an emotional anchor, keeping us tied to situations that no longer serve us. Jung teaches that conscious detachment does not mean forgetting, but allowing each memory to exist without interfering with our present freedom. A practical example: someone ends a relationship and continues reliving every scene, every word. This cycle of emotional attachment prevents new encounters, new experiences. Jung would suggest transforming these memories into internal learning rather than external walls that block life. In this way, each goodbye becomes a portal to growth and self-knowledge. Drama or overcoming films often explore this dynamic. Characters who only move forward when they confront ghosts from the past. Jung would show us that true courage is not avoiding memories, but integrating them into our life without allowing them to define us. It is in this balance between remembrance and detachment that true emotional maturity is born. And this is the point where freedom begins to become tangible. By detaching from the past, we open space for the present and the future. Jung invites us to live each moment without carrying invisible chains, allowing each step to be light, conscious, and intentional. This detachment is a daily, silent exercise, but deeply transformative. Total detachment is the culmination of everything Jung teaches us. Not clinging to people, objects, ideas, or the past. It is a silent, almost invisible freedom that transforms the way we perceive the world. Imagine floating without chains, without fears, and without unnecessary expectations. This state is not coldness, but full presence. A mind that observes without being imprisoned by what is external. Many people confuse detachment with indifference or selfishness, but Jung reminds us that it is exactly the opposite. Those who detach deeply can love more, appreciate more, and live more intensely. The difference is that this love is not dependent, does not demand return, and is not attached to guarantees. It is an emotional freedom that strengthens rather than weakens. Total detachment also allows us to face uncertainties without paralyzing fear. Jung would indicate that this attitude transforms each challenge into an opportunity for growth. When nothing holds us, nothing controls us, and each situation becomes an invitation to practice courage, resilience, and wisdom. It is like playing a game without knowing the rules, but with the confidence that you can adapt. Imagine a leader in epic films who does not cling to allies, plans, or achievements, but maintains absolute focus on their mission. This detached vision allows clearer decisions, bolder strategies, and freedom to act without emotional weight. Jung teaches that a detached mind is a powerful mind, capable of perceiving patterns that the attached could never see. Practicing total detachment does not mean abandoning responsibilities or bonds, but observing them without allowing them to define our peace. Each action becomes conscious, each relationship more authentic. Jung would remind us that true freedom emerges when we become the reference for our own life and not a hostage to the external. In daily life, this can be translated into small habits, not obsessively worrying about what cannot be controlled, not seeking external validation, not clinging to memories or rigid expectations. Each conscious step is an exercise in freedom. Jung would indicate that repeating this process builds solid emotional autonomy that nothing external can shake. Movies, series, and books often show heroes who only triumph when they let go of everything that holds them back. Jung teaches that the metaphor is real. Letting go does not mean losing, but gaining space, clarity, and inner power. Each detachment is an opportunity to become more whole, more conscious, and more capable of fully experiencing life. And it is in this state that true transformation happens. By embracing total detachment, we discover that happiness, security, and the meaning of life were never outside, but always within us. Jung invites us to walk this path of continuous freedom, knowing that each act of letting go is a step toward a fuller, lighter, and extraordinarily conscious existence. So, what did you think of all this? Were you able to see where your attachments might be limiting you and how to start freeing yourself? Jung teaches us that detachment is not losing, but gaining freedom, clarity, and inner power. Now, I want to know from you, which character do you want me to analyze in the next video on the channel? Subscribe and activate notifications to not miss the next content and continue this journey of self-knowledge and transformation. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And what if everything you believe about yourself is just a reflection of someone else's gaze? Click now on one of the videos next to this and start breaking this mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?